So seeing a psychologist, a counsellor, a mental health social worker, a community worker can be really good for the child themselves, but also for the family. What I think is underrated is the...
Hi, I'm Dr. Jodi Richardson, and this is Well, Hello Anxiety. In a world that often moves too fast, we're here to pause, breathe, and understand anxiety together. Each episode will explore practical strategies, share honest conversations, and uncover the science behind anxiety and well-being, all while creating a space where it's okay to not be okay. Let's continue this journey together. Lexi, thank you for staying around. Thank you for joining me for another episode. We finished off last week talking about strengths, and strengths is a language that I'm familiar with, and I know Dr. Lee Waters wrote The Strength Switch, which is a really great book, and I remember reading that. My daughter had just broken her arm and she was miserable, and I literally was the book I took to sit in the waiting room for 6 hours, so I pretty much read it in one sitting. But yeah, really great book, so if you haven't seen that, take a look. But could you give me an example of... I think parents who heard what we spoke about last week will be sitting there going, my gosh, yes, it is easy to focus on what's happening that's frustrating, annoying, difficult, hard to handle, exasperating into, your adjective. And yet when we do focus on the things that our kids are doing right, it reinforces it. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Could you give us a few examples of strengths that parents might be able to look out for in their kids? Like I think about my children, and ideas like kindness and dedication and persistence come to mind. There are a few different strengths. Can you share some others so parents can start to sort of get their head around this a bit more?
Absolutely, Jodi. And I discovered the strength which as well through my pediatric work, but I actually have used it more with my kids than I have with my patients, because It's actually changed the way I have conversations. I think it's really important to think of those strong personality traits or values, kindness, etc. But I think it's about being really specific, particularly with behaviour change, giving really specific, timely feedback. So say your child is playing with another child, they're a younger child, so they're 4 or 5, they're playing a game and they're throwing things and, they've suddenly stormed off and they're no longer playing with the child, and all you can think is, oh my God, they've ruined this play date. I just wanted them to have 10 minutes, being able to play with another child. And the temptation is to, when you have a conversation with your child, to say, I can't believe you did that. We organised this play date and, I can't believe you threw things at another child. Instead, just pause and go, what was the child doing well? So before bringing up the challenge and the behavioural difficulty the child had, think about, hey, I was watching you when you started playing with Sam and you were playing so nicely. You sat still, you took your time, you waited your turn, and you actually made eye contact and asked him, would he like to play this game? Would he like to go first or second? I know it got a bit challenging and it sounds like you got frustrated after that, but that beginning was great. And I think what that does is not focus just on the difficult behaviour or what went wrong. It's noticing what went right, and we don't often notice that. So I think that's an example in a younger kid. But I often think about this with teenagers. You get home, they've been home from school for 2-3 hours, the kitchen is a mess. There's last night's dinner still on the bench, the dishwasher hasn't been unpacked, you've come home from a long day at work, and you just look at your child, just eating something in the kitchen, not actually putting the dishes away, and you just want to scream, go, do you know how hard I've been working today? Can't you just think about undoing the dishwasher before I get home? Yeah. But I think once again, having a pause, not even thinking about, what's happened to my child today, just thinking about, okay, what is something I've noticed that my child is doing well? Hey, hope you've had a great day at school. It's really good to see you help yourself to a healthy meal after school. You could have gone for those chips if you knew where they were. But actually, I'm really impressed that you actually got last night's dinner and reheated it, or you peeled a few carrots and you're having that. That's amazing. And then not focusing at the time that the dishwasher hasn't been unpacked and the dishes need to be done. So starting the conversation with something positive that you've noticed, and then having a conversation, hey, it'd be really great if you could do the dishwasher before we sit down for dinner tonight.
Yeah.
Do you think you can do that? So it's really tempting to focus on the things that we notice that we wish had been done, but it's harder, but really more important to focus on something really positive.
Yeah, and it's about connection, isn't it? We were away for the long weekend, and I was chatting with one of my friends, and we were talking about, I sometimes have in my mind about connection or disconnection, particularly because my daughter said to me, because we've been having lots of conversations about the phone, and there's been some disconnection between us because she's really good and we'll have a good conversation, but we just haven't been able to arrive at a point where we're both kind of content yet. And we were in the caravan and I was reading my book, one in the caravan, she was at the other. And I remember that something happened, she was coughing, and I sort of sat up and said, hey, you okay? Do you want some more water? And she was like, no, that's cool. And then I thought I saw a flash of light and I thought, oh, she's picked up the phone. And I said, have you got your phone? And she's like, no, I haven't. It's right there on charge. And she, the equivalent in the caravan of the door slam is probably the pull the curtain across. And I thought, why did I even have to say that?
You started off with a admonishment or trying to, catch your child doing something wrong rather than catch your child doing something
right. And it's disconnecting. It really is. And I felt it, she felt it. And I'm really good at, I like to think I am pretty good at repair, in that the next day I said, you know what? As soon as I said that last night, I didn't feel good about it. I'm sorry that's where it went, when we were going to sleep last night. And I can come back and say that, but I don't want to be in a position where I'm going one way and then repairing versus just catching the good.
Absolutely.
And regularly.
And I think we don't want to always be repairing because that's a really challenging relationship and it's exhausting. But I think you've brought up a really good point. It's important for parents to role model repairing.
Yeah.
And so what we mean by that is that we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to be not ideal parents. And, most of the time I think a good enough parent, in inverted commas, is good enough.
Yeah.
But we're not going to be perfect. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to yell at our kids. We're going to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, and either we'll recognise it or not. But coming back for that next step of saying, hey, I'm really sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I was feeling stressed, or, I was just really worried that, you said you weren't going to use the phone and you were using the phone. But that's my problem, not yours. You were actually doing the right thing, I think is a really important step as parents, and it's one that many of us can't and don't do very well.
Yeah, it is. It's really appreciated when you do it. And I've seen my kids, they've been modelled that, and now they'll do it as well. I've seen that there'll be a reaction or something, then later on, look, I realise that I've reacted,
I think role modelling in all of this management of anxiety, behavioural management, I think modelling is so important. And I know that we sometimes think we're the parents, we can do what we want, but our kids watch, they hear, they see everything we do.
Yes.
And, I think talking about anxiety, parents often say to me, I get anxious at times, or, so-and-so has a generalised anxiety disorder or a panic disorder. Should we tell our kids about it, or should we not have that conversation? And I think that's a personal decision that you make as a family. But I think it's important that kids do see parents being vulnerable, having some bad days, but also seeing what you do when you're feeling vulnerable or having a bad day. So if I'm feeling anxious and a bit bitey as a parent, I'll often say, hey, sorry, I snapped at you. I'm just feeling a bit tense. I've got a lot on my plate. I'm going to go for a walk.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is you're acknowledging, I did the wrong thing. I am feeling a certain way, but my solution, or one of my, tools in my toolkit, is to go for a walk, get away, get some fresh air, etc. And hopefully then you're role modelling to the kid that they can say sorry if they've done the wrong thing, but they can also look into their toolkit, what works for them.
Yes, yeah, and it's just normal emotions. Nobody's happy all the time, and they need to see that in action, don't they? That you can have a bad day, and it also means for us that when we see them having a bad day, we don't need to panic. But
Absolutely.
we know that they're going to, and my son said to me once, something wasn't great, and he goes, "It's all right, I know how to look after myself, Mum, I've got it." And I was like, cool, okay, doesn't need my help, has learned. He's old enough to learn.
And that's such a win as a parent. If you hear your child say that, I've got this, it makes you feel so good. But a lot of the time that won't happen, and they'll go into their room, they'll shut the door, and it can be really challenging because if a kid doesn't talk to us and we think they're having significant issues with anxiety or their mental health, it's very hard to know what to do.
What can parents do if they're finding that that's their situation right now, where they want to support and put supports in place, but the child does not want to enter into conversations or into maybe, going and seeing somebody who can help them with what their challenges are?
Absolutely. So it's going to differ depending on the age of the child.
Yeah.
So you've got to do what's developmentally appropriate. I think if you've identified that your child is anxious, they're starting to avoid, they're starting to not want to go to school, they're not seeing their friends, they're not participating in the activities that they used to enjoy, the music, or even coming down for dinners, if it's persistent and if it's really having a functional impact on their friendships, their school, or your family life, then it's time to get help, because it's very hard to do that alone as a parent.
Yeah.
Often it's worth starting, if they're school age, speaking to the school. So the teacher, the school counsellor, someone who's in charge of wellbeing, trying to find out if there were any triggers or causes that happened at school. Was there a bullying incident? Are they struggling with their learning? Is there something going on that you weren't aware of? But that would be the minority of times. So the minority of times you will find a cause for your child's worry or anxiety or change in behaviour. But if you don't, it's still really important to work with the school on how to help your child.
Yeah.
And so if their reluctance is to go to school, it's about, working together with either a counsellor or, as I said, the wellbeing coordinator at the school on a return to school plan. What's that going to look like, rather than, push a child who's not been going to school to go for full days, 5 days a week? How can they have a graded return? Who's their go-to person if things aren't going well? Is there a way you can make that drop off at school a bit easier? So I think working with the school, if it seems to be an issue related to school or they're avoiding school, is really helpful. If it seems to be an issue related to the family and the home life, then working with professional help can be really helpful. So often the first port of call is the GP.
Yeah.
Having a conversation, telling them what's going on, and they can organise some referrals. So in Australia, you can get a mental health care plan, and you can get 6 to 10 Medicare-rebated sessions per calendar year to see a psychologist. And the challenge at the moment is it's very hard to find psychologists, but I think if you have a recommendation and you can go on some wait lists, then that can be really helpful. So seeing a psychologist, a counsellor, a mental health social worker, a community worker can be really good for the child themselves, but also for the family. What I think is underrated is the family work that you can do together.
Yeah.
And so it's a form of family therapy. It doesn't necessarily need to be, all the family every time in a consultation room. But kids don't live in silos. They live within a family structure and a family network. So a lot of the issues may be helped by discussing it as a family. Yeah. And I often tell parents if they have a psychologist involved and the psychologist is spending, every week or fortnight just working with the child, maybe they should have that conversation with the psychologist. Can they work, spend a bit of the consultation either alone with the psychologist to find out what they can do at home, or can they do some work together with their child about how to manage some of the worries, some of the behaviours that are happening?
Yes. And so for the parent of a teenager where the teenager is just adamant, I am not going to talk to someone, the parent can still go and get support, because so much of what parents do can have a positive impact on the child's anxiety.
Absolutely. So, the piece about psychoeducation, understanding what's going on for your child, understanding how to help them, support them, stand by them, sit with them, how to know when to push them a little bit but not too far,
yes,
and know where to go for help, both in the long term and in the immediate circumstance if it's an emergency. One of the things that has happened probably post-pandemic is that we're getting a lot better utilising telehealth, utilising texting services and utilising computer-assisted technology,
yes,
for therapy. So some kids, you will not get them out of their room to go and speak to a psychologist. Sometimes I speak to families about what brings your child joy, and if it's music, there are some really amazing music therapists out there. If it's art, there might be art therapists, there are dance therapists, but there also, it may not be therapy in inverted commas per se. It may just be getting your child out to do some of those activities that they've previously enjoyed,
yes,
is really helpful. So we can talk about that later. But in terms of therapy, I think, if they won't go and see someone and do some talking therapy, is there an online option? So Headspace and Origin have online therapists available. Is there some modules that they can do online? And there's a lot of good evidence coming out about technology-assisted therapy. So there's the BRAVE program, which is University of Queensland, I think, and that's a really good online, both for parents, for younger children and for teenagers. They can do some online modules to help. So there's a lot of research and invention and innovation being done in this space, which I think is really helpful, because most teenagers don't want to sit in a room and just have a conversation with the psychologist about their worries.
Yeah, there's so many alternatives there, and we'll put all of these links in the show notes, of course. Under what circumstances would a family be referred to a pediatrician versus a psychologist? And if you could explain for listeners what the role of a psychiatrist is as well in this mix of supporting somebody with anxiety.
Absolutely. So I might go back a bit. A GP is the family doctor. Everyone is able to see a GP. Some will be bulk billed and others there'll be a small out-of-pocket, and you get a Medicare rebate in Australia. If the GP is worried about your child or adolescent, either their medical, they may have some medical issues, they may have asthma, epilepsy, significant headache, abdominal pain, or they may have mental health issues, anxiety, learning issues, concern about attention and concentration, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, you may be referred to a paediatrician. And about 50-60% of paediatricians who are specialised doctors in Australia are general paediatricians. So we see everything from 0 to 18, medical, developmental, mental health.
Yes.
There are some people, paediatricians, who just focus on development and behaviour, but many of us have been trained to see the vast majority of patients from 0 to 18. So really, if a GP needs some support, needs some help, needs an opinion, they may send you to a paediatrician. But if you've got a paediatrician who's been involved with your child for another reason, they may have had jaundice, so yellow skin or yellow eyes as a baby, or they may have had allergies and you've seen a general paediatrician, they may be a really good first port of call after seeing the GP if your child suddenly has anxiety as an older child.
Yeah.
So really, paediatricians have experience with mental health issues, and we're seeing a very large number of children with mental health issues now because there is such a limited number of paediatric or child and adolescent psychiatrists in Australia. So they have usually done a different training. They've usually come through psychiatry training with both seeing children and adults, and then some specialised in child and adolescent psychiatry. Once again, they're specialised doctors who have done extra training to help with the mental health of children. And most of the time, we as paediatricians refer to a psychiatrist if we've got really, really tricky cases. So children who are on multiple medications, have multiple areas of neurodiversity, we're not winning. If they've got significant suicidal ideation or suicidal attempts and we're not winning. If there are other mental health issues developing, like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, which we don't often see in kids, that's when I'll reach out for a psychiatrist. But a lot of the mental health developmental behavioural work is being done by pediatricians now, because there are so few child and adolescent psychiatrists around.
Yes. And what's the role of medication? So a psychiatrist is qualified to prescribe medication, as is a pediatrician. Psychologist won't. Is not qualified to make a prescription. So
those with medical training, GPs, paediatricians, psychiatrists, we are all able to prescribe medication. A psychologist has a different background and predominantly will work with talking therapy, behaviour therapy, cognitive behaviour therapy for anxiety, which I know you've talked about a lot. So working as a team is really helpful. Most of my children, patients with significant anxiety, will have a GP, a paediatrician and a psychologist. I very, very rarely would use medication alone for anxiety disorder.
Yes.
The vast majority of children will have a combination of psychology therapy, and cognitive behavioural therapy has probably got the most evidence in older children. But who gets medication? That's a really important question. If a child has been working a long time with the psychologist and the psychologist and the family and the child don't feel like they're making progress, sometimes they will refer them back to us as paediatricians to say, listen, we're doing what we can, but this child is so disabled by their anxiety. They are not getting to school. They don't get out of the bed. It is crippling for them. We need something to break the circuit so they then can engage in the psychological work.
Yes.
That is one of the instances. So if they've done a lot of psychology and they're not making progress, we may consider medication for anxiety. If a child is so debilitated that they actually can't even start to engage with the psychologist, they're just not open, their brain is not open, their thought process is not open or able to do talking therapy, and things are really challenging, we may prescribe medication in the first instance. But as I said, I will always then get them to work with the psychologist to work, with their anxiety. But it may be in the first instance we need medication on board to take the edge off so they can then engage in therapy. And then the other role for medication, which is a different type of medication, is for children with panic disorder. And if they have significant panic episodes, we sometimes use medication in their toolkit, along with many other things, for them to have in case they start to spiral and, really struggle with a significant panic episode.
Yes. Oh, gosh. In the time that we've had together, you've shared so much, and I think that this last conversation about medication is really important because it's a question on a lot of parents' minds. They're aware antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication exist. It can be really frightening, can't it, for a family to make a decision about whether or not their child needs medication. Obviously, it's not a decision made alone, but just as a final question, for parents who have had the conversation with the team around their child and that medication has come up as an option that might be worth considering, but they feel really worried and really frightened about what that might mean. What might you say to those parents, just to sort of give them a little bit more insight? Obviously, we only have a few minutes to do this, and you probably refer parents to some really good resources as well. But just in the time that we have left, what might you say to a parent who's in that position?
Absolutely. I say we don't take the prescription of medication, anti-anxiety medication and antidepressants lightly in children. Yeah. It is definitely not the first thing we reach for. It is usually after they've been experienced, the child or the family have been experiencing this problem for a while, and it is something else in our toolkit. We have a lot of data and a lot of research about the safety of these medications, and it's not forever. Yeah. Parents worry that if you start a child on medication, they may be on this medication forever. And if they are, that's okay. But that's usually not the case. Yeah. Usually we have a plan with the family to try the medication. It usually takes 4 to 6 weeks to even start working. We might use it for a 6-month block along with the psychological therapy and then discuss it every 6 months as a team. is this working? Is it helpful? Is this the right medication? Is this the right dose? Do you think we still need to continue it on?
Yeah.
It's important that parents and families know not to stop these medications abruptly, but I think it's important to know that it's not always forever. It's often to break the cycle. And as children mature and they can do some other therapies, often they won't need medication anymore. But I think it's really important to try and break the stigma attached to medication, because sometimes it is what makes such a huge difference for our children.
Yeah, thank you. Honestly, Dr. Lexi Frydenberg, you have been a brilliant guest. You've shared so much with the families listening, and I really encourage, if you are listening along and you know of somebody who would benefit from these two conversations, because of course we've had part 1 last week and part 2 this week, please share these conversations with other families who you think might benefit. How can our listeners, can listeners follow and connect with your work? I know you do have a website.
Yeah, thanks, Jodi. It's been such a pleasure. I'm really passionate about parents and families and carers finding out, good information and being able to educate themselves with up-to-date research. So there are a lot of resources available that we'll put in the show notes. I post and reshare quite a lot of good information I come across on Instagram at Dr. Lexi Fry. I do have a website, drlexi.com.au. But I actually also want to point you towards a lot of the good resources from the Raising Children's Network, the Royal Children's Hospital, Beyond Blue, and some of the other organisations we've discussed today, because that's really good evidence-based information that's out there.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing. Your time is precious, and you've shared so much with me here today. It's just been a delight having you in the studio. So thanks again.
Oh, it's been lovely. Thanks, Jodi.
Thank you for sharing this time with me on Well, Hello Anxiety. Remember, understanding anxiety is the first step to managing it. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. Take things one moment at a time. Focus on what you can control and know that you are not alone on this journey. If you found value in today's episode, please share it with someone who might need to hear it too. I'm Dr. Jodi Richardson, and I'll meet you right back here next week.